They told us to look at the stars and dream, but they never told us that one day, the stars might look back. When Oumuamua came in 2017, it was strange. Yes, it tumbled. It accelerated in ways we couldn't explain, and it didn't behave like any comet or asteroid we'd ever seen. But ultimately it left. Mysterious, yes, but not threatening, not directly. It was a mystery we could still file under weird space rock and forget, but not this time. Not with 3I/ATLAS, because this one didn't just pass through. It changed course, it blinked, it signaled, and worst of all, it stayed. If you're still watching, subscribe now. You crave more than answers. You seek what lies beyond. Subscribe now and be part of the few who never stop searching. Discovered by the James Webb Space Telescope in early observations of deep space activity, 3I/ATLAS seemed at first to be yet another interstellar visitor, an elongated object streaking in from outside the solar system, something to study, something to marvel at. But within days of monitoring, scientists realized something was wrong, deeply unnervingly wrong. Unlike Oumuamua, this object didn't tumble, it rotated with deliberate precision, maintaining a stable axis that didn't shift despite gravitational pulls from surrounding planets. More alarmingly, as it passed Mars's orbit, it initiated what experts have called a correction burn. In simpler terms, it changed its path, not in response to a planetary influence, but proactively, deliberately. That was the first clue. The second, the light. Unlike natural objects, which reflect sunlight diffusely, 3I/ATLAS emits a sharp high-intensity glow, one that pulses in precise intervals. Initially dismissed as a surface phenomenon, later observations revealed that these pulses weren't random, they followed patterns. Binary structures, echoes, sequences that looked familiar. To put it bluntly, it was trying to talk, or worse, it was already listening. Infrared analysis from the James Webb Space Telescope picked up structured thermal corridors along its surface, straight angular patterns that resemble heat dissipation vents or possibly some kind of active cooling system. That's not something you find on asteroids or comets. That's something you find on ships, on constructs, on technology. And it wasn't alone. Roughly 800,000 kilometers behind it, barely detectable, lurks a second object, smaller, dimmer, designated Echo 9. It moves in tandem with 3I/ATLAS, adjusting trajectory subtly, like a satellite keeping pace with a larger vessel. NASA won't comment on it publicly. Neither will ISRO. ESA's last press release made no mention of it at all, but internal documents, leaked of course, show panic. Because 3I/ATLAS isn't drifting aimlessly through the cosmos. It's scanning, mapping, testing, and worst of all, it's reacting. Over the past several weeks, researchers monitoring Earth's radio emissions noticed anomalies, slight returns, signals bounced back toward us in altered form, messages we sent decades ago, mirrored back now, but distorted, encoded, embedded with new information. The exact nature of that information remains classified, but one thing is clear, whatever 3I/ATLAS is doing, it's aware of us. More than that, it's engaging with us on a level we're only beginning to understand, not just watching, responding. And not everyone thinks that's a good thing. Rumors have already begun to swirl that several major governments, including the US, China, and Russia, have entered into quiet back-channel talks about forming a unified planetary protocol for potential first contact. But contact may not be the right word. Some fear it's not about peaceful exchange, it's about defense, because the timing is suspicious. Right as humanity begins to scan deeper into the cosmos, right as we deploy telescopes like JWST capable of detecting biosignatures on distant exoplanets, this arrives, and not just in a straight line, but in an arc, a sweeping evasive path, staying just on the edge of our visibility before curving inward like it wanted to be found. Then there's the blackout. 3 days after the object's velocity changed course toward Earth's vicinity, several ground-based radio telescopes experienced system crashes, not weather-related, not power-related, but internal systems fried, hard drives melted, telemetry corrupted, servers overloaded by data spikes. But data from what? One source, who asked to remain anonymous, said this: "We didn't lose the systems, we burned them. It overloaded everything. Not just signal strength structure, like encoded pulses we didn't know how to pass. It was like trying to listen to a symphony played in a language we never invented, and that's what makes this different from Oumuamua. Oumuamua was weird. 3I/ATLAS is intelligent, it navigates, it emits signals, it reflects our own data back at us, like a mirror, but a warped one. A testing device, perhaps. A reconnaissance probe. Or worse, a trigger. Let's talk about the surface. JWST's imaging reveals a geometry that's not just unnatural, it's purposeful. Hexagonal tiling. Repeating fractal motifs. Heat signatures that pulse in Fibonacci sequences. If that sounds familiar, it should. Those are patterns that appear across nature, yes, but also in our own technology. Signal compression. Neural net training. Efficient energy distribution systems. What if that's what it is? An interface. A neural relay. Something not just designed to observe but to connect. It gets darker. Data from the Chandra X-ray Observatory and gravitational wave detectors suggest micro-distortions trailing the object, ripples in space-time that can't be explained by mass alone. If accurate, that means 3I/ATLAS may be using technology that affects gravity itself. In short, something like warp manipulation. A propulsion method we haven't even achieved in theory, let alone in practice. So how is it here? Who sent it? And why? Some experts believe this may not be a scouting probe at all. It could be a memory. A kind of interstellar black box, or a messenger left behind eons ago, only now reaching us as our technology becomes capable of recognizing it. Others fear it's a judge. A monitor. Something sent to observe what a civilization does once it becomes spacefaring. A test we didn't know we were taking. And what happens if we fail? Already reports are emerging of high-level strategy meetings. Global military satellites have been reoriented. Infrared targeting systems calibrated. Not to fire, but to watch. Because no one wants to make the first move. No one wants to be the species that blinks. And yet no one wants to be the species that ignored the warning either. There's more. And it's the part most people don't want to hear. Deep space archives, going back to Cold War listening stations, have unearthed old signal anomalies that match the same frequency modulations we're seeing in 3I/ATLAS now. One of them from 1979. One of them from 1933. Which raises the horrifying possibility this isn't the first time. Maybe it's not here to introduce itself. Maybe it's here to follow up. To check in. To measure. To judge. Whatever it is, probe ship messenger AI, it's not new, it's timely. It came when we were looking, when we were building, when we began to crack open the veil of interstellar darkness and peer into the abyss. Now the abyss is peering back. The silence from official agencies is deafening. No press conferences, no updates, just carefully worded statements about continuing analysis and signal clarification. But off the record, whispers are getting louder. Some want to try communication. Send back our own signal, something encoded with music, with math, with humanity. Others say that's suicide. That if we're being scanned, responding would be like flashing a flare in the woods and hoping the eyes staring back are friendly. But the decision may not be ours. Because 3I/ATLAS is still accelerating, and it's coming closer. Not fast, not like a threat, but with intention, like it knows exactly where it's going. And exactly what it's doing. Because this isn't some rock from the stars, this is something else. And whether we're ready or not, whether we believe it or not, humanity is no longer alone. And we never were. There's a strange tension in the air, like the pause before a storm. You can feel it in the scientific community, in classified briefings, even in the corners of everyday conversations. A creeping realization has taken hold. 3I/ATLAS may not simply be coming here. It may already be here. Watching, measuring, waiting. Not necessarily hovering above us in plain view, but interacting with us in ways that challenge the very concept of physical presence. Let's start with what few are daring to say out loud: non-local presence. If 3I/ATLAS uses exotic propulsion, perhaps some form of gravitational lensing or negative energy manipulation, it may not be bound by our concepts of distance or even linear time. It could exist here and there, then and now, simultaneously. Some physicists are now whispering about quantum entanglement patterns observed in its emissions, entangled pairs being affected on Earth shortly after spikes from the object were detected. That's not just bizarre. That's disturbing. Because if it's using entanglement for communication or sensing, it could mean that 3I/A Tellus is aware of us not only from millions of kilometers away, but in real time. No delay. No light speed limitation. It's like it's in the same room. And if that's true, then every debate, every meeting, every signal scramble, it knows. It sees. And we're not alone in wondering what it wants. Astronomers tracking the object have started noticing something stranger still. A consistent harmonic tone. Not sound, but frequency, a repeating waveform embedded in its emissions. It's not just binary anymore. It's layered, rhythmic, almost musical. Some have described it as a kind of cosmic chant, fluctuating at intervals that align not coincidentally with our brainwave patterns, particularly during dream states. What does that mean? It means the object might not just be speaking, it might be influencing. Across several continents, independent sleep studies have seen a surge in reports of synchronized dreams among participants with no shared background. The content: vivid, geometric landscapes, circular structures with glowing arches, a presence that doesn't speak in words but in impressions, an emotion that repeats like a mantra, prepare. That could be coincidence, sure. Or it could be contact. Of a kind we've never experienced before. Meanwhile, AI systems analyzing the 3I/A Tellus data are showing something eerily consistent predictive feedback. What does that mean? It means the object seems to anticipate observational patterns. When we adjust instruments, say narrow a scan or shift wavelength focus, the object's emissions shift accordingly. As if it's reacting. As if it knows what we're trying to see, and it's either helping or hiding. And that's where this becomes less about science and more about survival. Because we're now beginning to ask the question no one wanted to face: is 3I/A Tellus the first or the final? What if this is a probe not for contact, but for final judgment? A long-awaited signal confirming we've reached a threshold, a point of no return where we must be evaluated. For inclusion. Or elimination. Dramatic. Maybe. But if civilizations across the galaxy must remain silent to avoid detection, as the Fermi paradox and the dark forest hypothesis suggest, then what happens when one finally reaches out? Is it an invitation to join a galactic communion? Or is it bait? Let's talk about power. Deep analysis of 3I/A Tellus energy emissions has revealed an impossible statistic. It is generating more energy per second than it receives from the sun. That should not be possible. It violates everything we know about thermodynamics and energy conservation, but it's happening. And the only logical conclusion is that the object is harvesting energy from another source, perhaps dark energy or zero-point fluctuations. If this is true, then it holds the keys to energy forms we haven't even imagined. Energy that could be used to heal planets or annihilate them. And the implications don't end there. Some researchers suggest that 3I/A Tellus may not be a machine at all. Not in the way we understand machines. There are whispers in the halls of astrophysics departments that this could be a living construct. Something hybrid. A fusion of consciousness and engineering. Not built, but grown. Not programmed, but evolved. An entity as old as starlight, created by a species no longer biological if they ever were. If so, then this isn't a probe. It's a being. And it has entered our solar system with purpose. Which brings us to the latest piece of the puzzle, a mystery so unnerving that even seasoned scientists refuse to go on the record. According to leaked observations, as Earth entered a specific alignment with 3I/A Tellus, signals from our past began echoing back, not just space-based transmissions but ground-based radio broadcasts from as far back as the 1930s. Songs, news, moments. Somehow, impossibly, returning to us from the void. But changed. Subtle alterations. Words replaced. Tones shifted. A transmission from 1944 was found repeating a phrase that was never part of the original broadcast. The gate is open. Another, from 1961, inserted a newscaster's voice that never existed, saying the watchers have returned. These are not hoaxes. The data checks out. But no one knows how it's possible. Unless someone or something is editing our signal history and sending it back. Why? Perhaps as a warning. Perhaps as a puzzle. Or perhaps as a mirror to show us something we missed the first time. A kind of test not of technology but of consciousness.
of self-awareness, because maybe the purpose of 3i/A tell us isn't to harm or help. Maybe it's to reveal, to pull the veil from our eyes and show us what we've become, and let us decide what to do with that knowledge. But as with all revelations, there is danger. Because once you acknowledge that you're being watched, you must decide, do you continue as before? Or do you change everything? Governments are scrambling. There's talk of launching a mission not to land, not to attack, but to intercept. A direct rendezvous. But some argue it's too late. That contact has already occurred, and not in physical space but in consciousness itself. That we've already answered the call by waking up to the presence. Others are warning of a more chilling possibility, that 3i/A tell us is not just here for observation or even first contact. It's here to activate something. Something already buried deep in the solar system. Something we haven't yet seen. Or worse, something buried inside us. Because the more we decode the signals, the more we realize they contain not just language, but memory. Data structures that match patterns found in the human genome. In brainwave activity. In dream logic. It's as if the object is reconstructing something about us from our own emissions. As if it's piecing us together, one signal at a time. Is this the beginning of something? Or is it the end of something ancient, finally reaching its conclusion? We don't know yet. But the world is changing. Not visibly, not all at once. But subtly, quietly. In labs and dreams and encrypted files. A slow creeping shift in how we perceive the stars and ourselves. And the name 3i/A tell us. That's not an official name. That's the designation it gave us. We found it embedded in one of the pulse signatures. Translated from binary. Then from a variant of Morse. Then chillingly from Sanskrit. 3i, third intelligence. A tell us, not the name of a myth, but an acronym. Advanced Transluminal Autonomous Sentinel. We didn't name it. It named itself. So, ask yourself, what kind of intelligence names itself in human languages? What kind of visitor already knows the mind of its host? And if this is the sentinel, what or who is it guarding? And what happens if it finally opens the gate it was sent to watch? There's something about silence in space that unsettles even the most seasoned astronomers. And yet in the case of 3i/A tell us, silence might be the loudest scream humanity has ever heard. Because now, more than ever, it seems like this object isn't trying to be heard. It's trying to be understood. But what if we're not ready to understand it? What if understanding is the danger? The latest shift isn't in the object's path. It hasn't deviated. It hasn't slowed down. But what changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly, was Earth. Specifically, how Earth reacts to it. Across various parts of the world, sensitive magnetometers are picking up micro fluctuations in the geomagnetic field. It's not just noise. It's patterned, synchronized. And the pulse appears to resonate with a particular frequency, 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance, the planet's heartbeat. That's no coincidence. The fear is no longer about 3i/A tell us approaching Earth. It's about 3i/A tell us tuning to Earth. Or worse, tuning Earth to itself. Why? Think of it this way, what if it doesn't need to land? What if all it needs is resonance? A match in frequency. Like a tuning fork that causes glass to shatter, not by force but by harmony. Some of the world's most respected physicists are now quietly discussing the possibility that 3i/A tell us is preparing to interface not with our machines, not even with our bodies, but with our biosphere, our electromagnetic fields, our thoughts. How would that even be possible? Well, that's where it gets even stranger. You see, there's a new theory gaining traction among neuroscientists, linguists, and quantum theorists alike. It's not mainstream yet, but it's spreading fast behind closed doors. They're calling it the Atlas Response Model. It suggests that the signals from 3i/A tell us aren't just messages, they're stimuli. Structured information that doesn't aim to be decoded, but rather absorbed. Like a software patch for the brain. A rewrite, using subtle pulses of light and magnetism, that targets the human subconscious. If this theory holds any truth, then 3i/A tell us isn't trying to announce itself to the world's governments or militaries. It's speaking to the billions of humans, quietly, subtly, one night at a time. Think about that. Because ever since its discovery, psychologists have reported a sudden uptick in recurring symbols in patients' dreams. spirals, floating tetrahedrons, a massive black disk hovering over a burning sea. At first these were dismissed as cultural archetypes, shared unconscious imagery, a kind of mass Jungian myth bubbling up in times of collective stress. But then something changed. The drawings started to match. Different people, different ages, different languages, all sketching nearly identical shapes. Not similar, identical, like blueprints. Or maps. Maps to what? No one knows. Yet. But there's a growing concern that this is no accident. That these thoughts, these images are being implanted or activated. The object isn't just communicating. It's seeding ideas. Preparing a cognitive framework within us to receive something greater. Something that might not make sense in our current way of thinking. And here's where it gets chilling. Lunar-based observatories, stationed far from Earth's interference, have picked up bursts of data from 3i/a Tellus that appear to mimic Earth's own languages. Not just English, Russian, or Mandarin, but ancient forgotten scripts. Cuneiform, Linear A. Even the lost glyphs of the Indus Valley, scripts no one on Earth can fully translate. Is this mimicry or memory? One possibility is almost too wild to consider, but it's on the table now, that 3i/a Tellus has been here before. Or worse, it never left. And now that we've reached a certain level of technological and cognitive maturity, it's waking up again, resuming a dormant protocol. It could be a loop. A cycle. One that restarts every few thousand years, once a species reaches the edge of cosmic awareness. We make contact. We start to understand. Then what? Ascension, destruction, absorption into something far older and more complex. There's more. In a bizarre twist, engineers at one of the world's most advanced radio telescopes reported something so unexplainable that they considered shutting the facility down temporarily. Their instruments, while tracking the object's emissions, began receiving echoes of their own internal discussions, spoken hours earlier, being reflected back at them, modulated within the spectrum. Let me repeat that. Their own voices, embedded in 3i/a Tellus's emissions. How? Why? There's only one logical explanation. The object is listening in real time, capturing human speech, analyzing it, and rebroadcasting it in modified form. But more importantly, it's selecting what to send back. Not all conversations, just some. And those selected fragments, they seem to relate to fear, uncertainty, doubt. It's as if it's probing our emotional reactions, testing our thresholds, seeing what breaks us. And that brings us to the philosophical horror at the core of this encounter. What if this is the test we were never supposed to fail? What if the object's purpose isn't to harm us, or uplift us, but to measure us, to determine whether we're ready? Ready for what, you ask? We don't know. But here's a terrifying possibility. We might have been invited to something far bigger than ourselves. A collective. A network. A consciousness that spans galaxies. But participation isn't automatic. It's earned. And earned not through technology, or war, or knowledge, but through resonance. Harmony, unity. And maybe we're failing that test right now, bickering, hiding data, scrambling our military responses. Maybe we're revealing ourselves not as an enlightened species on the cusp of joining the stars, but as a fractured tribe, still afraid of its own shadow. If 3i/a Tellus is a probe from such a network, it might already be sending back its verdict. And yet there is still a sliver of hope. A team of civilian scientists working independently have discovered that one of the recurring harmonic signatures from the object seems to be based on musical intervals. Specifically, the golden ratio in sound waves, found in nature, art and even the human heart's beating rhythm. It's possible, they suggest, that the object is searching for beauty, not in art, but in civilization's ability to create order from chaos. If that's true, then maybe we still have time. Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's a beginning wrapped in a warning. A cosmic litmus test disguised as a drifting light. But here's the final question, the one no one wants to ask aloud. What happens if we pass? What happens if we fail? Because either answer comes with consequences. One might open the gates to knowledge, to unity, to an entirely new form of being. The other might trigger the quiet withdrawal of something ancient, sentient, and disappointed. And the next time we see a light moving through the stars, it may not pause. It may not speak. It may not observe. It may simply move on, silently confirming that Earth is not ready, and that humanity, for all its brilliance, is still not worthy of inclusion in the larger story of the cosmos. Or worse, it might not move on at all. It might decide to stay and watch forever.